Hello everyone, welcome to the Money Club series. We are back from COVID 2021. My name is Zah, I am your host, and I am joined by the Lebanese sausage, Sam Eljaban.
How you doing, guys? Why am I the Lebanese sausage?
I don't know, but what do you guys...
I put on weight, man. You hassle. It's a bit sensitive, mate. It's a bit sensitive.
You got a complex now.
I had too many Lebanese sausages.
Yeah. How have you been, Sam? Long time no see.
Good, yeah. I know it has been quite a while. It's good to be back.
About 4 months, yeah?
4 months. We've still been in contact, but physically here doing this kind of stuff.
Well, it's good to see you in person.
In person. And hello to everyone who's been patiently waiting for us to get back on the saddle. But nice to be back. What have we been doing? Pretty much same old thing. We haven't been too affected, both of us, I think, in what we're doing. So it's been business as usual.
Well, nothing really changes for you, Sam, does it? Because you just you can always just work from anywhere.
Anywhere.
You know, you're always just looking after clients, and you know.
All I need is a computer and a phone. So and tax is quite a good industry because everyone has to lodge a tax return. I sort of can't, touch wood, go out of business to an extent, unless I'm shit the clients.
Recession proof.
Recession proof, correct. So it's a good gig, but yeah, just keep them busy. And yourself, what have you been doing?
Mate, pretty much nothing. Getting fat, myself turning into a sausage, and
the Malay sausage.
I grew a beard, and I recently just, only just now, shaved it off because we can't have two beards on camera. It's just a bit too much.
Too controversial.
Yeah, probably. I didn't want to show you up. But in terms of my experiences with the latest lockdown, I think the first probably 6 weeks for us was very quiet. I think everybody was shitting their pants, and it was very different to last year. Last year everybody was still able to pretty much work and move around. There wasn't as much restrictions.
There was no lockdown last year, was there?
No, there were just restrictions, right? So you could still go to the shops and all of that sort of thing. But this time around, we were shut, right? We had businesses were actually shut, and you couldn't leave on the weekends. There was nothing you could do, and it was an interesting time, And I think the first month we were a little bit uneasy, not just from a business point of view, but also from, I guess, a lifestyle point of view, because we're so used to moving around and doing different things and seeing people. But then we ended up sort of enjoying it because it was a bit of a break, and then. After that, the say 5 to 6 week mark, we ended up getting so busy. And I think it's because people had time to think about investing. They were probably at home consuming our content, and they started to realize, oh wow, well I might as well look into putting my money to work and all of those sort of things. So, as you know, if you've been living under a rock, I'll let you know that the property market's on fire.
Ballistic.
We've had up to 40% growth in the last 12 months, which is massive. So now there's a bit of FOMO. Everybody's wanting to jump in. It's been an interesting probably 4 months because it's very different. We've never been through it before, but a lot of lessons learned and a lot of things are going to happen in the future after this whole, I think, year plays out because next month is already Christmas. So, I think next year is going to be just as interesting.
I think we're past the sort of negative connotations to the virus. So I think moving into the new year, there's going to be a lot more positivity. So riding that newfound wave of, growth and stuff with property, in your case, it's funny how there was a standstill that you experience and then just a boom of activity, and I think that's just going to carry forward into next year. It's going to be a very different year, I think, coming.
Well, it's funny, we were all prepared for this rebound when that Freedom Day, I think, what date was Freedom Day? It was
was it October or something?
Yeah, last month. And everybody was looking forward to it. I was, especially I was looking forward to the gyms opening up so I could work off this sausage belly, So, we were all so excited to get back out there, get haircuts, go to the gym, start going to restaurants again. And I think some businesses weren't prepared for the rebound. And I guess it's a good thing because too much business is better than not enough business. And I think that first 2-3 weeks, everybody went mad. And look, in some industries, people are still going mad now. And I guess what we want to talk about today is more so the aftermath of this whole lockdown and this year, and what's going to come out of it and what we've learnt, some of the things that are happening in the world today. And I think it's really important for people to understand what's happening now and what's going to be happening into the future. Like for example, inflation's through the roof at the moment, and if we had picked that, say, 2 or 3 years ago, which it would have been hard, but even if we picked it, say, 12 months ago, when COVID first hit us, we'd probably be in a much better position today.
Yeah, I agree. I think moving forward, especially after this period, a lot of people really have to get on to the education behind money and how it works, because we're in a time where it's going to be played out in society, given what's been happening, which we'll go through in detail with our points today. But very interesting time ahead, I believe.
And there's a lot of information out there, right? And you just said a key word there, which I love. It's education. And I mean, nowadays, like, you don't really need to go to uni or anything like that anymore. Get huge student loan debt. Like, you can literally
internet connection. You're there.
You can learn everything off YouTube. You can learn everything off podcasts. Like, you'll probably learn everything from this podcast. So there's so many avenues now where you can take education from. And I'm constantly keeping up to date with what's happening in the world today, financially.
It's pretty much a full-time job trying to do that.
Yeah,
there's a lot of information
every day. Every day, I'm scanning news articles on. I'm reading the Financial Review, all of that sort of thing. And look, it's armed me with really, really sound knowledge to where to invest my money, what's going to give me the best return in the short to medium term. Because we were always taught in the past to just focus on long term, right? Because it's just easy, compound over time and all of that. But I mean, what we're really interested in is really sort of what short to medium term, because we want to know we're going to be okay next year, because there's a lot of fear, right? There's a lot of fear in the market at the moment. And I guess the more educated you can become, the less fear there is, the more you can, I guess, mitigate that risk and come out on top. So let's go through our 10 post-COVID money aftermath points.
Let's do it. All right, so what we've sort of identified, and through pretty much anyone you talk to, whether it's banks, media outlets, anything, there's going to be a long-term supply of cheap money. There is talk of it going up slightly moving forward, but considering the history of the cost of money, i.e. interest, it's going to be quite low for, it would seem, the next decade, up until 2030. So I think that's going to be a very big component moving forward after this time. And what people have to understand is, coming from an economics point of view, I had to tap into some historical learnings back at school. When interest rates are low, what that actually means is that the economy is not in a good shape. It's not in great shape. They're lowering interest to try and stimulate activity. So it is a sort of, it sounds weird, like you go, oh, it's mad, we got cheap money. But that actually means the economy is not doing amazingly well. But you can still capitalize on that, and if you're making sound decisions with that money, you can come out on top. So I think, the long-term view moving forward is a lower interest rate, which is going to stimulate a lot of growth, which is what the government needs in this time.
Yeah, so it's not just about house prices, right? No. So the RBA have been in the news a lot lately about becoming under pressure to raise interest rates because house prices are through the roof. Like we just said, some markets are like sometimes up to 45% in growth in the last 12 months, which is, look, not sustainable, right? That can't happen again in another 12 months, and so on. So the RBA are pressured to raise interest rates because, they don't want to see that same growth happen again. But the problem is the RBA aren't really interested in house prices, even though it's an important component to the Australian economy, very important component. But their concern more is the economy as a whole. Now, the economy as a whole is driven by economic spending. And we've talked about this in previous podcasts about the wealth effect, right? So if your property's gone up from 1 to 1.2, 1.3 million, you effectively are $200,000 to $300,000 more wealthier.
Richer, yeah.
Now, that is a lot of money for someone who, I guess, is on a wage of, say, 100 grand a year.
Yeah.
So those people are going to go, okay, well, you know, my net worth has climbed about $250,000. I'm going to go buy the jet ski. I'm going to go to the nicer restaurants. And, you know, I'm going to spend the money. And that makes the economy go round. Because if what's happened during lockdown, we talked about it before, right? We were in our homes, right? We were cooking our own food, right? And we were eating at home. We were basically allowed to go to the supermarket once, right? Yep. And whatever you could get, you know, it was the luck of the draw because everyone's panic buying and buying all of the Lebanese sausages, right? And you're running out of everything.
Yep.
So you're basically just buying what you need, just the bare essentials, and then you're going home. You're not spending the money in restaurants. You're not spending the money at a gym. You're not spending money getting a massage, right? So the economy stops. So the RBA really needs to stimulate it. Now, those are little things, right? But it trickles onto other things as well. Like, for example, cars. You don't even need to buy a car because you're not driving anywhere. You know, I own 5-6 cars. I didn't drive one of them. You know what I mean? Because I didn't leave the house.
There's nowhere to go.
There's no point. So, you know, I'm not going to go and buy another one. So it's one of those things where, okay, the economy needs to run and it needs to be stimulated, as you said. But what happens when you raise interest rates?
It'll slow down.
It'll slow down again. We've already had that slowdown. So this long-term cheap money, a lot of people are going, oh, what if they raise interest rates? It's gonna throw everything out. Well, yeah, they can raise interest rates, but they're not going to increase it by much.
No.
Like it's not going to go to 10%.
No.
It's not going to even go to 7%, right? If it goes to say 3%, it's still low.
That's right.
For $1 million, right, it's going to cost you $30,000 a year in interest, right? So right now, I think the interest rate is what? Let's say 2.5%, right? Costs you 25 grand opposed to 30 grand. That extra $5,000 is not really going to hurt you, right? And if the extra $5,000 is going to hurt you, we've got a bigger problem than interest rates, right? You've got to get your money right. Don't you reckon?
No, 100%. And like on the other side of that, when interest rates are going up, that means the economy is doing well. That means you've probably made money on that house. They're trying to stop growth. It's growing, so they're upping the rate.
Very good. So if you've bought at $1 million, say 2 years ago, and now your house is worth 1.5, and then all of a sudden the RBA goes, hang on, you know, everyone's made too much money. Let's put the interest rates up by 1%. It's an extra $5,000 to $10,000 a year in interest repayments, right? Like, you've made $500,000.
That's right.
An extra 5-10 grand a year is nothing, right?
It's nothing.
Yes, an extra 5-10 grand a year if you don't have an asset is, you know, it's going to hurt you, right? But if you've got an asset that's increased in value in 2 years and by $500,000, that interest rate rise isn't really going to hurt you. So, concluding, the long-term cheap money is here to stay.
And I think it's a psychological play for the powers that be to make us spend. They want us to spend out of the problem. And it's going to happen. It's happening now. Everyone's buying property. Property's up. That's just one area that's happening.
Get as much of that debt as you can.
Next one, which is a good interlude into, is inflation. One of my favorite topics. You love it too now, don't you?
Oh, man.
You're trying to hedge everything.
I've gotten into inflation probably when COVID first started, right? When COVID first started,
it started being floated around.
Yeah. So I've always been big on, you know, hedging inflation, right? Through, you know, commodities, real estate, all of that sort of stuff. But when COVID first came back in 2020, at the start of 2020, right? We, as a nation, started printing quite a lot of cash. And it just got more and more and more and more. And then that's when I started really sort of getting into more commodities, more real estate, more land. And
anything except for cash.
And look, cash. if you look at everything, fuel, like I had to fill up my wife's car yesterday. It cost me $160
very expensive.
Do you think I've bought her the wrong car?
We'll have to ask her.
I need to get her a hybrid. But $160, the fuel was $2.20 or something.
That's insane.
Imagine 10 years ago, you go, oh yeah, fuel's going to be $2.20 a litre. You'd laugh. You'd go, no way.
And that's the thing with inflation. You sort of don't see it. It creeps up on you, and you forget history.
And
you forget prices.
It's there. Everything is so expensive now. Like groceries, obviously real estate, even used cars. So the cars that I have, that I bought, say, 2 or 3 years ago, that I still have, are actually worth more than what I paid for it 2 or 3 years ago. When has that ever occurred, right? And it's because obviously supply shortages, material shortages. They've got shipping container
blockages
issues and all of that sort of stuff. So it's all contributing to it. But as much we can all whinge about it and we can all bitch and moan about it, but it's not going away.
Yeah,
it's here.
It's to identify and combat it. Because everyone here mainly earns a salary. 90% of people are earning salary. And what you have to understand is that money it's not going to help you moving forward. You have to do something with it. I want to go a bit nerd on everyone. I find inflation quite interesting and how it works, because a lot of people don't know. Even I studied economics back in school, and I forget, and revisiting it makes for interesting reading. I'll just go through it very simply. So the term inflation, we know it's an increase in prices over time, but what it actually means as a definition is an expansion in the money supply. So inflating the money supply. So it's increasing the amount of money in the economy, which makes sense, but we relate it to increased prices, which is what it does. So it's actually inflating or expanding the money supply. And how they do that, the RBA, so the Reserve Bank of Australia, they come into the market. So they're usually just, their point in the economy is to manipulate the interest rate. Okay, it's called monetary policy. So the RBA, to put a downward pressure on the interest rate, they come into the market and start buying government bonds. And a government bond is like a share in the government. They'll pay you a return on that money for funding the government. And what they do, they effectively create money on the computer that has been created out of thin air. So it's a digital number, and they go into the market and they buy these bonds off banks. The banks are flush with cash, they lend that money out. That's increasing the supply of money in the sort of retail space for us. But then what happens, the government's bonds go up in value because of this new demand. So the government's shares are going up in value. And what happens there is then they are allowed to borrow money. So by doing this, what they call is quantitative easing or bond buying, is it's creating a lot more money in the economy, which is going to, when there's an oversupply of money, the value goes down, which creates an increase in prices over time. So I wanted people just to have a basic understanding. This money is created out of thin air, and it devalues your money because they're creating it out of nothing to try and help the economy. So you just have to understand that, okay, save your money, but just do something with it. Don't keep it as cash. And
this has been happening like for a very long time, Sam.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so it's not like it's just a COVID thing.
Correct.
This has been,
there's targets for inflation.
They want it to happen.
3%
right?
a year.
It's a, what do they call it? A silent tax.
That's it.
Right? And why they call it a silent tax is because people aren't educated on it. And the reason why we don't learn about this in school is why?
They don't want you to know.
They don't want us to know. Right? Like we talked about it the other day. It was like, we should have learned this in school. And you went, oh, yes, well, I learnt it in economics. And it's like, well, not everybody does economics,
True,
right?
True.
I didn't even do
economics. I had 3 people in the class, man.
3 people?
They were going to cancel it. I said, no, how can we do it?
They're going to cancel the class. That's how boring the class was. But it would have been helpful for everybody to learn, right?
It's very good.
But the reason is it's not pushed is because inflation is the silent tax on mainly employees.
Correct.
So when you go to school, you're basically trained to be an employee, right? Correct. A robot.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but you're on a fixed income. Now, when prices of goods go up by 30, 40%, when petrol goes from, say, $1 a litre to $2.20 a litre, right? There's nothing you can do as an employee to sort of fill that gap. You just got to fork out that cash. So it's a silent tax on you, right? Whereas, say, a business owner, such as us, we can control our income,
absorb it.
right? Turn up marketing, make more money, right? And now, we can adapt to the $160 fuel tank that we have to do every week, right? So the silent tax, it's really, really important to understand it first. And it's been happening for a very long time. And you're right, Sam. It's like, yes, it's okay to obviously earn a salary and all of that sort of thing and save money, but do something with it, right? Hedge it, put it into, I don't know, it could even be crypto. They're talking about crypto being a really good inflation hedge now. We've become a bit more educated on that lately. Do we recommend it? Maybe after you've done quite a bit of property and some stable investments, but it's an idea and something to consider to hedge inflation.
Just to give you an example, so I did some data research just to finish off the inflation, what's happened. $100 in 1901, 100 years ago, right? $100 back then, if you had to spend that money now, it would cost you $6,300. So if you had that $100, it's lost 63 times its value in 100 years. That's just your cash. So it's gone down 63 times. If, however, you put that money, the same $100, into an investment, some sort of asset back then, a share, whatever it is, and it grew at 5%, which is very average return.
Conservative.
Compounded over time. That would get to a value now of 14,500 or 145 times its original value. So that cash, if it didn't get used, lost 65 times its value. But if you invested it, it would have went up 145 times. So it's just, when you look at numbers like that, it's insane.
You know what's sad? And people just spend their money on disposable, depreciating items, right? Which is like, it's not even like, the comparison, you actually can't even compare it. It's enormous. It's so far apart. So if you can get your head around it, like, you hedge it at least, even if you're going at 2 or 3%, you're going to be so much better off. Hey, let's move on.
Yes.
Social changes.
Okay, big one. Just like you said, when the lockdown occurred.
No one wants to cuddle anymore.
Well, you combated that with your new kitten.
Yes,
right?
yes. I get enough cuddles from him.
Constant hugs, mate. Constant hugs. But I've seen a lot of changes, a lot less human interaction, a lot less meeting up in person.
I'll tell you what happened after lockdown. I didn't want to meet anyone.
You didn't want to?
No, and I'm a very social person, and I'm, quite, I guess I consider myself extroverted, and, I love people and all of that sort of thing. But, like, we were getting invited to social events, and because, everybody wants to get together, and I'm just like sitting at home going, do we have to go?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I actually prefer to be in lockdown. And I think a lot of people would feel that way.
It was a good break. It was a good break.
Yeah.
But how did that change you, though, being in lockdown? Like, what happened? I think I just got used to being on my own. Okay. I got used to doing my own thing. To staying solo.
Like it was obviously I was at home with my wife, Jade, and we really enjoyed it. Like, we're cooking new dishes every night, and we were spending a lot of time together, and we loved it. I hear a lot of married couples tearing each other's heads off, but we actually probably fell more in love together. You know what I mean? It was amazing.
That's a nice.
But like when it was time to get out for Freedom Day, where everybody was like, wanting to go to the pub and all that sort of thing. Yeah. I was like, well, I'm pretty good at home now. You know what I mean?
I was comfortable in my pajamas, just chilling out. I put a belt on and know what's going on.
And look, this is coming from me, who's actually quite, I'm very social and
very extroverted.
I love people. I love my clients. I love my friends. So imagine everybody else out there that sort of feels the same because it was so long.
I think there was polar opposites. I think this environment, it made people either communicate less or communicate more. Really at the home front, like yourself and Jade found, you communicated more. And for a good couple, it's going to be nice for them. For a bad couple, it's probably going to expose some problems, right? But I think in a professional space, everyone working from home, there's distance in communication, which led to some problems, even that we faced. So it's sort of funny how it went to, instead of just a medium in both spaces, at work you had a medium communication, at home medium. It went to, at home is full communication, at work was like no communication. So it was a bit of polar opposites. Yeah.
So I guess we should cover where the opportunity lies, right? I think the opportunity lies with this social change in people don't really want to meet anymore. Like, everyone wants to do Zoom calls, not everybody, but a lot of people just because they've become lazy, right? They don't have to, you know,
don't have to go anywhere. Don't have to commute.
You know,
no commuting. No
yeah,
nothing.
and everybody wants to do Zoom, right? Even we talked with our broker the other day.
Yeah.
We said, oh look, we need to get together once a month and go over clients and everything. He goes, yeah, sure, we can do a Zoom. And I went, hang on, man, like, we want to get in front of each other. You know what I mean? Yeah. And this is the thing. It's so easy to say, hey, let's just do a Zoom, right? But that relationship, I guess, doesn't really get nurtured the same way as being in person. So what I've done is I've gone against everybody's sort of new way of communication and gone, no, let's do the lunch.
Yep.
Let's do the dinners, right? I'm making the effort to go to people's places and to see them and to sit with them, nurture that relationship. And I tell you what, that's where the opportunity lies, because everybody else is doing phone calls and Zooms, right? While you're going across the country and meeting everybody.
You stand out.
You stand out.
Yeah, I agree. And the long distance stuff, it'd just be like a long distance relationship. How often do they last? Really?
Not very long.
They don't last long, because you're not there, you're not intimate with each other, you're not intimate with the client. They're not sticky with you.
You don't feel their energy.
No.
Look, Zooms are great, but, you know, like, if you really want to get your point across, you've got to do it in person.
Yeah.
I'm an old school type of guy, and I just think that's where the opportunity lies, because no one is really going to be looking at that.
No, agreed. That's a good, another segue into the next point.
Yep.
So what we found moving forward, there's going to be an increased digital presence for business. I've seen it a lot of clients that I was dealing with during this time that didn't have a digital presence, had to find one, otherwise they were gone. That was even in, say, the hospitality space. They would still keep their kitchens open, but they'd market online for pickups and all that kind of stuff. So I think moving forward, it's going to be, if you don't have an online presence, unless you don't need one, maybe some types of industrial businesses and things like that, larger sort of commercial businesses dealing with governments and stuff, maybe don't need that. But a lot of the retail or client-facing businesses that we're involved in, which most people are involved in, are going to have some sort of presence. But like you said, to an extent, I still think that human interaction needs to be there. But from a marketing or survival mode or just moving into the future, you have to have that digital presence.
I think it comes down to personal brand. And you've said this in the past, Sam, that everybody is a business themselves as an individual. And I just think now having a digital online personal brand is so important, because you're not going to be seen in the office as much as before, right? You need that as your resume now. And when it was funny, right? We had someone wanted to send me a gift box, and they've never met me before, right? And she ended up sending a fruit platter, right? And I was like I love fruit, right? And then so I called her and I said, thank you, but what made you send fruit? It was very usually you get chocolates or wine or something like that. And she goes, Zah, I Googled you because I've never met you before, and I realized you're actually quite into health and fitness, right? And I was like, wow, that was really cool. If I didn't have that digital presence, right, I would have probably got the shitty bottle of wine and the box of chocolates that I don't even eat, right? So I think, but professionally, I think it's really important, because when people want to do business with you, they'll search you and then they'll see that credibility there. So I think it's very, very important. Indeed. And it's going to increase into the future. Number 5, we've got to keep moving.
Let's do it. Okay, wealth transfer. Okay, what we saw during COVID, it wasn't too bad in Australia, but there's a lot of death, which results in transfer of wealth to younger people. Another type of wealth transfer that occurred, which I think people don't really understand, it comes back to economics type stuff, is the government handouts. Okay, everyone says there's no such thing as a free lunch. Okay, all this money that got put out, JobKeeper, JobSaver, all this kind of government stimulus, the loans and all that kind of stuff, that gets paid for. It's not for free. So another type of wealth transfer is this public debt that's occurred by the government borrowing money against its higher bond price, right? Borrowing that money and then funneling it to businesses. And it comes to a notion called privatizing profits and socializing losses. So what's happened is Jerry Harvey, for example, Harvey Norman, He's been making a shitload of money with his online sales, but he got a lot of JobKeeper. And the country, the taxpayer, me and you, went into debt to fund his business to make profit during this time. And it's transferring wealth from the general people as the taxpayer to business. So that happened a lot during this time as well, which I don't think a lot of people picked up on. But yeah, there you go.
The rich getting richer.
Well, that's sort of what happened. And if you go back to what we were saying about the government borrowing money, what happens there is that inflation occurs. So businesses, assets, everything that generally wealthier people have are going up in value, but your wages are going down. So it's
a massive problem, isn't it? Which I guess leads us on to the number 6 with the increased wealth gap, right? Asset prices are going up.
Everything's going up.
Shares are going up. Anyone that has cash tied up in, I guess, appreciating things, like assets, they're all going up. Now the issue that we have is, Generation Z and maybe Generation Y, a little bit of them, they're not in the market, whether it's crypto or real estate or anything. And Mark Bouris recently, actually it was only today, came out with an article which was written by Daily Mail, saying that don't bust your ass to buy a home, right? Because he lives in Sydney and he's obviously probably talking to mostly Sydney-siders. With a median house price of 1.5 million now, and even at 1.5 million, what are you going to buy in Sydney? You'd have to buy an apartment.
Very basic something.
So he's basically saying, don't push yourself, like if you're in your 20s, to just buy the home, because what's going to happen is you're going to live a miserable life. You're going to be handcuffed to a mortgage where interest rates will probably go up, and you're better off investing in an investment property that is income producing, which, there are still deals out there for under 500 grand, right? Invest in your business, invest in yourself, like we always say. So, the wealth gap is there, and it is a problem in Australia, but we can solve it by becoming more educated and making smarter decisions early on, because we're talking about the people who are younger than us, right? Yes, they're facing an affordability crisis, but what they can do? They can learn about crypto. They can buy an investment property. There are multiple other avenues to make money than buying the home. And I think the increased wealth gap is focused so heavily on housing affordability. It's not the only thing that we invest in.
How many wealthy people don't own their home? Heaps.
Yeah.
And how'd they do it? By not owning.
I don't own my home.
And how'd you do it? By not owning a home. Yeah. Because you experienced, say, a housing price issue as well, right? Say in five years ago, it's still expensive. It hasn't gone down. It's only ever gone up.
Well, the reason why I didn't buy a home, I've always lived in Sydney, right? So the reason why I didn't buy a home because it was too expensive. Right. So I bought investments. I don't own a place in Sydney. Right? Like this, if I did, I'd live in it. But I can't afford it. You know what I mean? And when I say I can't afford it, I can't see value in putting my money into an asset like that produces me fuck all returns. No return, right? So I put them in cash flow producing assets that are positively geared, that don't cost me any money per month, right? I'll put it into crypto, I'll put it into commodities, things that are going to give me a bigger return than, say, a $1.5 million home. Now, the problem is people look at a house that's gone from 1.5 to 2.5, right? And then what happens is they say that $1 million capital growth, but that's only one dimensional of looking at a property's performance. The $1 million capital growth, right? We didn't take into account the cash flow, the tax depreciation, all of that sort of thing. So yes, it's all well and good to say, hey, we made $1 million, but think about the holding costs and all of those things that are associated with owning property.
And then again, it's only $1 million on paper. So you're not, unless you do something with it and then utilize it to grow more, it's really just paper money. You haven't done anything.
And this is the problem, right? People go, oh, I can sell my home for $1 million more than I paid.
Go and do it.
Okay, do it, but then what are you going to do?
Buy again.
Buy a home that's now worth $2.5, $3 million, right? Like, it's all relative. So, again, I back what Mark Bouris is saying, you know.
Well, you've done it.
Yeah, because I've done
You're
it.
a case in point. So really there is a wealth gap, it's increasing, but there are ways to combat it, is what we're trying to say, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Oh, this is an interesting one.
I liked talking about this during the week, Sam.
The Roaring Twenties?
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Tell us what the Roaring Twenties is.
So the Roaring Twenties is the period of time in the 1920s to, I think, the late 20s. And it was after, obviously, World War One and the Spanish flu. And it was essentially what we're leading into, a time after a crisis. And...
so Spanish flu was 1919, right? So about 100 years ago.
100 years ago, and after the World War One.
So COVID was timed quite...
yeah, it's very similar timing.
100 years.
100 years later, we got a similar, not similar, but a big issue in the whole world.
Well, it is similar, isn't it? Like flu, COVID, it's sort of the same thing.
Death, people dying.
A lot of people died
Economy's
in Spanish flu. I think it was like, what, 50 million people or something?
Something like that.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And the people in the war that died. So a lot of Australians died. So, the economies were under strain, people, less employed people because they've passed away and all that kind of stuff. So it sort of mirrors that time period and leading into the 20s, like where we are now after the fact. And I had a look into it, and they said, you know, the historians of economics, they were saying at that time after the war and the Spanish flu, you had a lot of tech improvements, you had a lot of mass production occurring, so it's a new kind of mechanics in the economy. Mass marketing, which we already have, cheap credit was a big thing then, and increased employment.
So it's all the same stuff.
Very similar stuff that we have here, the recipe, as to back then.
And it's very interesting, right? Like if our listeners can sort of Google it and look it up, right? Like there are so many similar comparisons to I guess what the government is doing to get things going again. Yeah. And if the result was the Roaring 20s, which means like just the economy just went gangbusters for 10 years, right? It's highly likely it's going to happen again. So will there be a crash or, you know, like a correction? Yes, there will be, but probably not for a while. And I feel that, you know, the next decade is really... it's ripe for investment. Yeah. Like a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines because they're like, oh no, it's going to crash, it's going to collapse, and you know everything's going to fall over, the bubble is going to burst, and like they can't afford the bubble to burst really if there is a bubble. They need it to keep going. Now, if it does sort of come off the boil a bit, but it's still going to be more than it was, say, 10 years ago.
That's right.
So I think the next decade is there's still so many undervalued assets out there that are ready for people to invest in. Like I'll give you an example, right? We're releasing a project next week, which are a set of Brisbane townhouses. They're around the $750,000 mark. They're about 9-10 Ks from the Brisbane CBD, 10 out of 10 location, right? And there's $750,000. They're actually quite cheap. They'll rent for like $650, $680 a week. So they're positively geared, right? They're house-like interiors. So they're like big 4-bedroom townhomes. If you could have done that, say 15 years ago in Sydney, 10 Ks from the CBD, in a 10 out of 10 location where incomes are through the roof, would you have done it?
You would have tried to buy 5 if you could.
You would look at back now and go, wow, that is so cheap. So those opportunities are still there.
Still available.
Right? So you just gotta go and hunt and find them. But hey, the next 10 years, that's what's going to happen.
Opportunity. I think that with the cheap credit, like back in the 1920s, you know, tech improvements, everything's digital now. Increased employment, another one. So we don't have to touch on it for long, but increased employment or people. We're still doing okay, and people haven't come back to the country.
Well, there's a labour shortage at the moment, there's a skills shortage, right? So, which will push up wages, you know. But what will happen is the government will need to open the floodgates for immigration,
for people to come down.
Skilled people to come through and take the jobs and start paying the taxes
and buying property.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's still to come.
Start paying for the inflation.
Helping us pay for it.
Yeah, because we need the help, right? Number 8.
Next one. Okay, investing. Okay, this is, I guess, a comparison between investing pre and post-COVID. So pre-COVID, we're going back a while just to emphasize the difference. It used to be quite hard to do or carry out investing. Even buying a property, you had to go to the solicitor's office, sign with them, all that kind of stuff. Now you have DocuSign, a lot of digital improvements in processes of investing. We set up crypto accounts, SwiftX. Same day we had money in the market. I think pre-COVID and going back a long time, it was quite hard to put your money into something. But now with tech and all that kind of stuff, it's become, man, you can do whatever you want. Within a week, people have bought property, signed contracts. Where before it used to take a long time.
Well, with all these apps and everything now, it makes it almost instantaneous, right?
That's right.
And you were saying, back in the day when we used to invest in shares, you'd have to sign up to ComSec and, all of these.
Take weeks. And then by that time, you might have missed the opportunity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But now it's like, bang, you can do it straight away.
It's crazy how fast you can get the information, number one, but actually act the deal, right?
Act on it.
And this is what I get incredibly jealous of young people, because I say to them, because they don't understand, right? They didn't live through our time, but I look at people who are in their early 20s and I just go, man, you have the greatest opportunity right now. And a lot of them, they act like victims and go, oh, housing is so expensive, everything's so expensive, everything's going up in value. It's like, yeah, but you have the opportunity to educate yourself more than we did, right? We didn't have YouTube or podcasts or apps and
mentors.
We didn't have crypto back then.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Nothing. It was very limited.
Yeah,
very limited.
And now there's so much out there, and I think the opportunity is probably greater than it was, than it is for us. You know what I mean?
Agree, 100%.
So number 9,
property. So property pre and post COVID, I would say. Well, since the beginning of COVID, property didn't seem to really be affected too much. I think there's a lot of scare, there's a lot of concern, but even through COVID with deals you were doing with clients, and even deals I personally did, we didn't see too much decline. No,
I think this is probably one of the first times where we've seen every single market go up in value, and I think it's a hard time, because the problem we have now is that there's a lot of people that don't go and seek advice, and because they've got access to the information and the apps and all of that sort of thing, they think that they can sort of select the right property for themselves. But the issue that we've had, because in the last 12 to 24 months we've had growth in all markets, or most markets, anyone can look like a superstar.
Correct. Yeah.
So, if you had bought a year ago, you're going to look like a superstar in any market, right? Yeah. Where pre-COVID, in order for you to get growth, you had to pick a market that was at the right stage of the cycle. It had, the yields were there to support it, and you could see there was projected yield compression, which meant that you would get some capital growth, infrastructure spending. You had to do a little bit more research in order to get that growth, or to achieve that growth. Whereas with the last 12 to 24 months, you could have just closed your eyes, pointed somewhere on the map, and would have made money.
Made some money.
So it's still really important, probably more important than ever now, to sort of look at, okay, if interest rates do go up and the market does sort of come off the boil, doesn't become as hot, which markets are going to fare, right? Yep. And which ones aren't going to lose money. And I think people get carried away with, the big regional towns that are going through the roof because everyone's going, you can work from home, which is changing the landscape right now. But, eventually, people will head back to the cities, and to go and be amongst other people who are in the same sort of wealth bracket. So there are many factors to consider, I think, moving into 2022, 2023 when it comes to property.
Yeah, I think it was a good point. You said nearly anyone could have made money in the last 12 months to 18 months, which is a fair point. And I guess this decade moving forward, you'll start to see which ones were actually good investments. So time will tell.
I think rents are going to go up as well, because there is a housing shortage. There's no supply coming onto the market, and as the market sort of does come off the boil, there's probably going to be less people building stock.
Yep.
And once they open up immigration again, there's going to be more demand.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens when there's high demand and low supply?
Rents go up.
Rents have to go up.
Yeah. And if housing is continually unaffordable and keeps going up, there'll be more renters as well. They can't afford the house.
Exactly.
So it's all looking...
So yields will go up. So a lot of people say, oh, well, what if interest rate rises? You know what? The rents are going to cover it.
That's
anyway.
Right.
Number 10, last one.
Last one. All right. Lessons learnt. Okay. I guess after going through it, a couple of years before, and then COVID hit, and now we're looking into the future. What can we take away from what's occurred? I think what really happened is a lot of people because their money was affected, they went, shit, what's going on in the world? And I think that was a good thing, and it really made people pay attention and try and start doing something and not just rely on their super or a pension moving forward.
Wake up call.
Wake up call, yeah. And it did a few things. I think it exposed liquid and solvent people. And what I mean by that, liquid people is, or coming from an accounting term, it's like someone who can actually get by with their money, budgeted well, and their cash flow is okay. Solvent's a bit more longer term. So I think it's really identified who was doing well with their money, who wasn't. And if you weren't, pick up your game, learn a few things, do something different. As well, it sort of identified what industries are endurable. Like you said, the tax industry is quite endurable.
It exposed a lot of fickle industries, and I think, it taught people to reconsider, what their futures look like in terms of even education. If there's still a lot of people that go to uni and all of that sort of thing, I think it made them think, okay, well, I'm not going to get a Bachelor of Arts degree because it's not really going
there's no future in it,
it's not going to benefit me.
Correct.
I need to do something that's, I guess, recession-proof, like accounting.
Yeah. So don't join too many. There'll be too much competition.
Oversupply.
Then we have to start charging less. So yeah, I think I identified differing industries that probably have a good potential for you moving forward. Obviously the inflation effect, assets going up, it's identified that. It's more common knowledge now. People are seeing it, hearing it, they can understand it. And I think it's just a matter of, learning from it. And if it ever happens again, you know how to tackle it.
Yeah, and I guess the last point you've got here is, work on your physical, mental and financial fitness to weather any storms. Like it's a combination of everything, isn't it, Sam? And I think, those people that were quite unfit, whether it was physically or financially, and even spiritually, I think it's, those people are really going to pay the price when things like this happen.
Yeah.
So I think education's probably the best inflation hedge here. Because if you learn about it and you know it, you'll be able to, I guess, tackle the issue when it comes.
Agreed.
So that's it.
Awesome, man.
It's good to be back, Sam.
I felt good, mate. It felt good.
Yeah,
man.
So, guys, I hope you guys didn't fall asleep while Sam went through all of
some
his
economics,
high school. What did you
revision,
do? What year were you in high school?
That was year 11 and 12.
Wow, that's why you're so smart.
Still remember the teacher? You remember Mr. Woodford?
Mr. Woodford.
Smart bloke. We need him on here.
Yeah, let's get him on as a guest. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode back. And welcome back, Sam. Thank you for that. And we'll catch you again very soon. Peace.
See you guys.